I had always dreamed of having a SawStop table saw. I saw one at a furniture conference, I used one in shop class, but now that I have one, is it all it's cracked up to be? And is it worth the high price tag? Let me start out by saying I have used a Craftsman contractor table saw for many years, since high school, when I convinced my dad to buy one from a friend. That saw has its quirks, but with the addition of a U26 fence from Vega Woodworking, as well as a zero clearance throat plate, it made it a great saw, and it's performed very well for many years. I did have a dream though to someday own the hot dog saw, although it was ridiculously out of my price range. After I started my YouTube channel, I started saving any revenue I got from that, from planned sales on my website, from anything else that I was getting money from. Eventually I had saved up enough to get my bucket list saw, which was the 3 horsepower professional cabinet saw from SawStop. And let me just say that one of the main reasons why I was able to get this saw was thanks to all of you for subscribing to my videos, for watching them, for buying plans on my website. All of that has been the key to be able to make this happen. So thank you, all of you, so much. Now, let me explain a little bit about the saw. Contrary to what you'll hear from a lot of fairly prominent internet woodworkers, if you have a path to ground between you and the saw, that's not what trips the saw. This saw works using something called capacitance. So what that means is everything that can hold a charge of electricity has a certain capacity or a certain amount of electricity that it can contain and hold on to and store. There's a charge in the blade when the saw is powered on that knows how much electricity can be stored in that saw blade. When something else comes in contact with that blade, the capacitance changes. A human can hold more electricity than a saw blade can. And if that capacitance changes for 25 microseconds, then the sensor is tripped, there's a fuse wire that is cut instantly, and then the spring expands, which slams the brake cartridge up into the blade. And that momentum of that brake cartridge hitting the blade and stopping it from spinning full speed to a dead stop, that momentum also forces the blade below the table. It just drops it instantly. So if you've seen the demonstration in a store with the hot dog also has a capacitance change that's enough to trigger the blade. It's a pretty amazing technology. And it's one that was researched for many years. There's been patent battles over it. Table saw manufacturers didn't want to license it, didn't want to buy it. There's debate back and forth to this day. But regardless of that, this technology is pretty phenomenal and it works very well. Now, if you want to test it out when the saw is off, you can very easily just touch the blade. So down here underneath, I have these 2 lights here. And if I touch this blade, the light here will flash. So I can test whether the system is working. There's also a built-in delay. So if I touch that blade and I let go, there's I think 5 seconds or something before you could start the saw. For my setup here, I decided to go with a 36-inch table and the industrial mobile base, which gives me 4 casters so that I can move the saw around in my tight space here. Many of you are probably saying, yeah, but how am I going to fit a cabinet saw in my small shop? Well, what I ended up doing was cutting about 5 inches off of the end of the extension table. Now, I didn't really lose much because my fence rails are still the same length and the table's made out of wood. If I really wanted to replace it someday, I could either build a new one or buy a new one from SawStop. In the end, once it was all installed, it ended up fitting in the same footprint as my old table saw. I did have to add a 220 circuit in my shop so that I could get the 3 horsepower saw. In terms of the assembly, there's a lot of steps and a lot of details, but I was blown away at the in-depth, well-written instructions that explain in great detail every single step of the build process. And heck, it's spiral bound on cardstock. Maybe that's why the saw is so expensive. At no point did I get terribly lost or confused on the assembly of it. And even when I discovered that my extension table was warped, SawStop quickly sent me a new one. There were lots of boxes and lots of parts, but with the help of my lovely assistant, I got it all put together and moved into position. It was a bit sad saying goodbye to my old saw, which has served me so well over so many years, but I knew he was going to a good home where he would get used. I have now had this saw for about 7 months, and I've had the chance to test it out with different types of wood, different types of cuts, and it is a phenomenal saw. It's very high quality. It is a precision piece of machinery that is well made. In almost every aspect of the design, they have thought about what the end user is going to be doing with it. And to me, as an engineer, that is a great design. But now let's talk about my original question. Do you really need a SawStop? A table saw is a really important tool in any woodworking shop, and it has so many uses and applications. But the important thing about it is to learn how to use it safely. The blade is not going anywhere. The blade is going to be in the same place at all times. Your hands are moving. So you need to make sure that your hands stay far away from anywhere close to the blade. I will never rip anything less than 8 inches without a push stick. I have seen some people do 2 to 3 inches or less, but that is way too close to danger. I like to avoid that completely. If you learn how to use a table saw safely, you won't have any trouble with it. Do you really need a SawStop? My answer is no, but let me explain why. Any good table saw can be used to do some phenomenal woodworking projects. The SawStop is not a requirement for entry. You don't need to have the top of the line saw, the one with all the bells and whistles, but you do need to learn how to use it safely. I don't use this table saw any differently than I did my old table saw. The safety feature is there as an extra backup, but I am not any less safe with this saw than I would be with any other table saw. Now, would I recommend this table saw to anyone who could afford it? Definitely. It's an awesome saw. The safety features are amazing. The quality and the build of the saw is amazing. If you're just starting out woodworking and you can't afford this, don't worry. It's better to just get a decent table saw and learn how to use it safely, and it's better to be a bit scared of it too, because then you respect the tool. Once you get cocky or you get overconfident, that's when accidents happen. I've personally never had an accident on a table saw, but that doesn't change how I act towards the table saws. I always respect them. I always am aware of where the blade is, where my hands are, and I keep the two very separated. When you save up enough money to get one, I would highly recommend it, but don't let that stop you from doing woodworking. Is this saw worth the high price tag? The short answer is yes, because someone has to pay for that cardstock and spiral binding. In all seriousness though, this is a really high quality saw, and I think it is worth the price that you pay for it. This is the kind of saw that you buy once and you can use hopefully the rest of your life. Even without the safety features, it's a well-designed and high-quality saw. The safety feature on top of that gives it that extra bonus, that extra boost to make it worth getting this over something else, which is why I went with the SawStop. I hope this helped to answer some questions you may have had about the saw. If you have any more, feel free to ask them in the questions below, and either I or some other owner of the SawStop will be able to help you out and answer that. Don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can get notified when I post a new video, and see you next time.